right, welcome everybody. You're listening to the Production Channel, where we bring you the stories and interviews across all sectors of the production industry, including live events, broadcasts, worship, sports production, really just anything, all things production. If you're a show tech backstage or you're a producer creating amazing events, this podcast is for you. It's about you. And so we're just really glad to have you here. I'm joined by Clem Harrod, my very good friend and freelance projectionist. Welcome, Clem.
Chatter. What's going on, Bowles?
And so Clem and I, my background, again, Stephen Bowles, live video director and also founder of Shoflo. We are here today just to really dive into really a whole new topic we haven't gone to yet, and that is lighting. So if you've ever been in a major show, been to a concert, whether think U2 level or smaller, one of the most important and powerful experiences and parts of just everything that we call production is lighting. And so as Clem and I have kind of been going back trying to figure out who is really one of the experts in our industry to talk about it, it just was very clear that we need to bring on Richard Dunn. So welcome, Richard Dunn, to the Production Channel.
The one and only.
What's up, guys?
Hey, Richie.
Pleasure to be sharing the room with you.
Yeah, man. So, little background on Richard for anyone who hasn't known him. Richard is a freelance lighting designer, but it's really so much more than that. So he services really the whole spectrum of production, everything from live events, traditional corporate, and also just sort of specialty events, and then concerts, as well as really the thing that I've always really been impressed with Richard is his television experience, because that's just a different type of craft in the way that you approach that when you're really lighting for camera. And then he's even, if you go way back in the day, had some experience with House of Worship and things like that back in Canadian days.
True
so
story.
Richard, just high level, again, welcome. Just very, very excited to have you on here. Why in the world lighting? Like, how in the world did you even find this industry? And of everything you could have done, why lighting?
Oh, it's crazy. When you think about this, it's weird too. It was probably, I've been doing this for about, 22, 23 years. And it's one of these things where I literally woke up one day and realized this is it. I guess this is what I'm doing for a living. It started out, I went to university in Lynchburg, Virginia. I went to Liberty University, and I grew up in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. And so I ended up down there and went to a few concerts, and I had always been very, very intrigued with lighting. The church work I did was something that was very close to my heart at the time, and so I got very involved in that. And then when I went to university, I thought this is something that I'd really like to continue. Again, I didn't understand a lot of the philosophy behind it or even what was entailed. One of those if I knew then what I knew now kind of situations. So ended up at Liberty University and went to a couple of their concerts and thought, man, I want to do this. This is really cool. I'd love to work with the lighting team. So I found out who the lighting director was for the concerts, and I went and I talked with him, and I said I would like to work with you. And he said, well, what experience do you have? And I said, not very much. And he said, I'm not sure that we're interested in having you come on board.
Wow.
And it was like strike one out of the gate. I'm like, you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to encourage me, and yes, come on board. And he said, I just don't know that if we have room for you. So I kind of made a deal with him. I said, listen, there's 2 more concerts coming up this month. Let me work for free for the concerts coming up. And if you enjoy working with me and you like my work ethic and what I have going on, then maybe we can talk. And so he kind of paused, and that was a very interesting way to approach this interview. And so he said, you got a deal. So the next concert was coming up in a couple weeks, so I got on the install team, and that night when it was all over, he came up to me and he said, let's not worry about working for free for the second concert you're in.
That's awesome.
So that was kind of my first initial, hey, listen, this is what I want to do, and I just kind of showed that I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to get in. And then it was just 4 years of working concerts for the university. And to kind of just skip past all that, growing up in New Brunswick, Canada, I've always been an obnoxious dreamer, obnoxiously glass half full. And so growing up in New Brunswick, Canada, I just always had the Disney carrot hanging in front of me. Thought I would just, I would do anything to work there. And it was a very unattainable dream to do that. So once I got to Liberty, I thought, well, my next step from here, I want to go down and work at Disney. And everybody just kind of, yeah, that's nice. So I one summer I drove down and interviewed with the folks there, and again, oddly enough, they said, you know what, we do have an intern position for you in the tech department at the Magic Kingdom. And I was stoked. So went back, and to make a very long story short, sold a bunch of things to get enough money to drive down the next summer. And
That's great.
And when I got there, I went to the casting building, and they said, we're not sure what you're talking about. We don't have a job in the entertainment department. Yeah, so I'm standing there, pretty much broke at this point, standing in the office, and I said, I'll take whatever you have. I'm here now. And they said, well, at this late time, the only thing we have is selling the glow-in-the-dark jewelry on Main Street at night. And I thought, that's lighting. I'll take it. I'll take it. Awesome. So yeah, I spent my first summer selling glow-in-the-dark jewelry just to get my foot in the door. And by the end of the summer, I had managed to find out who was in charge of the tech department at the Magic Kingdom, and gave him a call and sat at his desk and let him know, I've been working 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. every night this summer just so I could sit here and meet you. And that was kind of the second time where a prospective employer looked at me and said, you were willing to do that to do this? And I said, absolutely. So he said, I can't deny that. So he specifically made sure that I had a place the next summer, and came back. And that's kind of that's the beginning of it all. And again, looking back on it, it's kind of interesting to see in both those situations. Both those situations had to work for me to end up where I was, and in both those situations, I literally had nothing to lose, and said I'm going to put myself out there. And so that's in a nutshell how I ended up as a lighting professional.
You know, what's so crazy for me is as you're talking about that, and you're talking about how you did what you had to do to get where you wanted to go, how that still applies for today, just trying to find those jobs and trying to find that right fit for yourself in our industry. Oh yeah,
it's crazy. And not to get too deep on this, but it applied back then and it applies now, and I personally know both your stories, and I understand that this applies to you guys too. There's basically 3 C's in life that dictate everything, who you are and what you do and where you're going. First one is your circumstances, the second one are your choices, and the third is consequences. Well, if you look at your circumstances, your choices, and your consequences, you only have control over one of those things, and that's your choices. You can't control who you were born to, where you were born, the financial, the status that you were born into, but you make choices based on your perspective, and then you have no control over the consequence of that choice. So life is just a series of making a choice, assessing the consequence, making a choice, assessing the consequence. And in my situation, I made these choices to put myself out there, and the consequence for the Disney thing was we don't have a lighting position for you. You can sell glow-in-the-dark jewelry at one of the worst places, the worst positions you can have, being down there. And so that was the choice I made, and the consequence was meeting the guy that ultimately hired me for the job of a lifetime at the time.
Nice.
Pregnant pause. It happens even in production. This is when the CEO just hit the stage,
and the video was supposed to be rolling, but it didn't come up.
VTA, go,
right.
Go.
VTA.
Somebody wake up, Clem.
Graphic.
Somebody please wake up, Clem.
All right. Well, tell me more about now that we know how you sort of bumped into or backed into lighting. How does that look for you on the daily grind right now? I know for a fact that you're not just kind of doing small breakouts or sort of smaller level shows, but that you've really engaged in some large scale projects. So take me through a fun one. Take me through one that's more recent and kind of like, for people who are curious, what does the role of the lighting designer, what does that actually involve? What does it include? Kind of take us through that from soup to nuts.
Got it. I guess kind of taking a quick step back, looking at my role as the lighting designer is a very interesting one. I have a very tangible job. You walk in, you see it, the haze is going, the lights are going, and you can see what I've done and you can absorb it. And so it's really interesting because when people attend a production, there's so many things. They walk out there with an average feeling of how that entire night went. And that included how the lights looked, how the sound sounded, the air conditioning, was it too hot, was it too cold? Everything about that night, they leave with one average opinion on what just happened. So it's interesting to know that although not everything I do is noticeable, and a perfect example of that is when you get in for cameras and all the TV work, that's not subjective. There's either an evenly lit stage or there's not. And so talking to some of the video guys right now that have had to shade my work, is one of those things where it's either right or it's wrong. And my audio friends see that every day, that when there's feedback, when there's a frequency dropout, everybody notices what happened. And so there's two specific parts of my job. The one is the very subjective part where he's in the dark, that's wrong, fire that guy, why would you hire him? And then the subjective part, and they're both equally as frustrating because with what Clem does, he has a specific goal. It's converged, it's colored correctly, and there's not much left to interpretation. It's either right or it's wrong. But on the lighting end of things, I don't like that color combination. I wish he wouldn't do that. What a boring show, what an exciting show. So once I load in, and all the mechanics are done, the load calculations, the truss, the weights, the distribution, the power, when that's all finished, I have literally everybody from the guys setting chairs to the executive producer telling me how it should look and what I should be doing. And I have to, handle all that criticism professionally and calmly and with the right attitude. So at the end of the day, going through what happens with me on a show, I did a show about a year ago for a big corporate company, and we were in Whistler, British Columbia, and they had 3 waves coming in, and every wave ended with a Katy Perry concert. So what was kind of cool about that is that they go ahead and they send their plot in advance, and this is where, so somebody makes the call and hires Richard. I need to find out how big the show is, where the show is, what size of the show, what budget of the show, to make sure I know that I can put together a show that you've sold the client. And one of the frustrating parts is a lot of times the production company will have already sold the client on a pretty picture drawn by a set company and a creative director with no regards to physics. They put together a really pretty cartoon and they take it to the client and they say, that's awesome. We're going to buy that. And then they bring it to the lighting designer, the audio designer, the projectionist, and the video guys and say, okay, this is what we've sold the client. And so now not only do we have to make it fit in the room, we have to make it fit in the budget. And sometimes that's very difficult because at that point when they've sold the show, they don't know the load restrictions on the rigging. They don't know the loading docks and the accessibility or how much power is in the room. So all of a sudden we sell a show this size that doesn't have enough power and we have to bring in a massive generator. Well, there's an expense that nobody counted on. So we have to make all that work. So anyway, backing up to this, the Katy Perry folks send us their rider and what they need for lighting. And we go ahead and we find vendors that can supply all this equipment. And at the same time, I have to make my corporate show work. So I have to take everything they need, fold in with everything we need on the corporate side of things, and we move ahead from there. So once the gear list is done, then we actually have to put pen to paper and put it down on a plot. And so with the venue drawings that we get from the technical director, we lay in all the truss and we figure out all the weight calculations, and then we send it back to the venue for approval. Once that gets approval, we can then move forward on booking the labor and working on our production schedule. And this particular show, we had 24 hours from the time we got the venue to the time Katy Perry hit the stage.
Wow, that's a short amount of time.
Yeah, and that's crazy, especially, it's one thing if it's a tour where you've rehearsed your load-ins, and you've rehearsed your pack, and you've rehearsed setting it up. And that's the stressful part about this, that it's hard to convey to people. As much as this is an adrenaline rush, and we've all been there when you pull it off, we've all been in those situations where you think, is this the time we don't make it? Is this the show where something beyond our control happens and we miss doors and we don't open in time? And that's the difficult part on staying calm and staying focused to get it all loaded in time, and that one did. We had a phenomenal crew, and we got that in and up and running, and 24 hours later she hit the stage, and all was great. But I wish there was a way to bottle up that feeling of we're not going to make it. And we've all been there where it's a half hour to doors and you have a piece of equipment go down, and literally there's 5,000 people looking at you saying, are you going to make it? You don't know if you're going to make it, but you say yes.
Yeah.
And then you just find a way to make it work. And that's a lot of it. When at this level, when they call you guys and when they call me, we're not there for when things go right. We're there and we're hired and we're brought in for when things go wrong.
So true.
And that was a situation where we had a really tight turn, and the guys all came together and made it work. So basically, once we get all the parts and pieces lined up and we get into it, there's so much coordinating with the video guys, with the audio guys. You get all the truss laid out, and then you're right at your max weight, and then you talk to the video guys, and they want to put 2,400 pounds of projectors on your truss.
I don't like your tone there. I don't like your tone.
And then so they walk in, and then we got to resubmit drawings and all this kind of stuff. Or they were already on the drawing, and the lighting guy comes in and puts too much weight on.
Or puts movers on there.
Yeah. You don't want movers on your projection truss.
No.
So anyway, those are some of the things that we run into that might not necessarily hit the audience first off on, and rightfully so. They don't care. They want to walk in, they want to see their show, and they want to walk out. And it's our job to make when they walk out there at the end of the night saying that was one of the best things I've ever gone to.
Richard, I want to touch on something real quick. When you were talking about the Katy Perry and situations where, like, basically you expose some vulnerability that a lot of us face in this industry, and that fear, and then sometimes that overwhelm. What do you do specifically to try to calm that anxiety?
Very great question. It's not something I widely speak of, but I project to the strike, and I do this a number of times of years when I'm in those situations where I think we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. I think back to my 20-some years of doing this and the 99.9% success rate that a lot of us at this level have, and I literally picture myself on the plane flying home. And all the other times I've been in that situation, and I've ended up with this incredible adrenaline rush on the plane on the way home thinking, we friggin' did it. We shouldn't have done it. It wasn't physically possible. Nobody should have expected us to succeed, but we did it. And so in that moment at 3 o'clock in the morning, when the motor 32 is not going up and they have to swap it out, and that's 45 minutes we do not have, I will literally stand there and imagine myself on the flight on the way home, as I have with hundreds of other shows, thinking we did it. And that doesn't fix motor 32, but it calms me down, and lets me know that, okay, we've been here before and we've made it.
Yeah.
And so I just remind myself of all the other times that I felt that way, but we've actually pulled it off.
And I love how you're talking about the adrenaline rush to that flight home. You get that adrenaline rush looking forward to going home, and you know, that makes me think about that work-life balance as well, you know.
Oh man, there's been so many times I literally called my wife at 3 o'clock in the morning one time and said, I'm done. I can't put myself in this anyway. It was a huge DL3 project, and the TD on the show didn't calculate the backstage throw distance far enough, and I didn't have enough projection for the lenses in the DL3s, and again, we were getting into, you know, doors are at 8:30 the next morning, and this is at 5 a.m. and things still weren't right. And you know, before it got to that point, I just called her and said I have to vent. But then, you know, it works out and it gets through. And that's the other thing. You literally go from, you know, 10 hours earlier, I quit, I got to find something else. I can't keep putting myself through this, to the rush of, I can't wait to do this again. I can't wait for the next load in and for the next show and for the next challenge. And that's the drug that keeps me coming back.
Yeah, the dopamine.
Crazy, man. Crazy.
You know, it's sort of, I've seen a lot of shows where when things aren't going well, like right during walk-in, or even really the biggest one is like during the opening act, right? For general sessions, there's usually like a big opening or open, and it's a sequence of cues that everyone's sort of been rehearsing for a couple of days and hours. When that's not going well, when that train wrecks, typically I find that there's two different types of people who respond to that. There's the people who watch the train wreck, and then there's the people who sort of jump in and try and get us out of it. So I've seen literally opening sessions happen where you know, the doors don't open, and we just did the big announcement for the CEO to come to the stage, and everyone's just sitting there going, it's not opening, it's not opening, it's not opening, it's not opening, you know, whatever. And we're all just sort of like, this is going so bad, it's going so bad. And then one person calls on and just goes, just send them around the side, you know.
Right, right. It's so basic.
Someone just solved this right now, you know. And I think that's sort of what you were talking about there, and that is to an extent what our responsibilities are, particularly when you're the leader of the department, right? Well, when you're the LD or the lead projectionist, you've got to have experience in seeing enough situations go left, right, up, down to where you can essentially solve it just by going, I've seen this happen before and we solved it this way.
Well, and it's so funny that you bring that up, because in my personal life, my wife will get frustrated with me sometimes because I don't show emotion, or I don't show concern, or I don't get worked up. And she'll be like, doesn't this bother you? Yes, it bothers me a lot. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks one time. I've spent the past 22 years not showing concern. I'm paid to tell the client it's going to be okay. And it's hard to turn that off. You know, she just wants to see me freak out sometimes and say, this isn't right, we have to fix this.
Right.
But you can't do that on show
site. No, we're conditioned to say, it's cool, man. It's cool.
Carpe diem.
Yeah, carpe diem, man. Seize the day. I was doing a show one time, and it was a big, like, I don't know, 50th anniversary celebration, and they had this massive 12-foot wide cake, and we rehearsed it, and the lights pick it up here, and this and that and the other thing, and we rehearsed it for hours. But guess what we didn't rehearse it with? We didn't rehearse it coming through the 10-foot doorway at the end of the aisle. So in the middle of that session, all the lights swing back, and the chefs are pushing it through, clunk, and it hits the edge of the doorway. And live, and it can't come in. So they literally sliced it and then walked it down the aisle.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was crazy. But you're exactly right. We're not there for when things go right. We're there for when things go wrong.
You touched on a little bit, Dunn, on the front as far as work-life balance, but tell us about that. Like, you've been doing this now. You've been hustling for, actually, how long have you been doing this?
Probably 22 years, 22 or 23 years. Yeah.
So, and how much in a given year are you on the road?
A slow year would be 6 months. A busy year would be 7 months. So I'm gone between 6 and 7 months a year.
Gotcha. And you've got, you know, tell us a little bit about your family, where you guys are living right now, and how many little ones, or if any, do you have?
Yeah, we're in Canton, Georgia, about 45 minutes north of Atlanta. My wife and I have been married for 20 years, and we have a 4-year-old daughter. So that kind of changed everything. But the work-life balance thing is such an interesting conversation. I have both influences in my life. One that says, hey, work is your focus. That's how you provide for your family. Then others that say, you know, you don't need the iPhone. You can, you know, buy something cheaper, and all of these things take you on the road. So it's certainly something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I heard something, it was probably about 1.5 years ago now, that really changed the way I feel about work-life balance. When you think of balance, you think of 50-50, and you think of the scales being balanced at any given time. Well, unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. So I look at work-life balance as a 50-50 balance over time. And are we talking a year? Are we talking in a season of your life? And I try to focus on a 50-50 balance through the year, and not at any one given time. So there are times where I'll be out for a 3.5 week run, and that's when it sucks. That's when it's FaceTime every day, and your daughter misses you, and you're neglecting things at home. But if you look at the schedule and you can get around that, and you can get to your 3-week break at the end of it, that's when you try to stay focused. And my wife has been so cool during this whole time. It wasn't a decision. I didn't make the decision to leave. We made the decision for me to be on the road. And that certainly helped. And at the end of the day, if she said, I don't want you gone, I couldn't put that on her. I couldn't, you know, for some in some circumstances, she's a single mom as far as taking care of our daughter and taking care of the house and running the business of a household. But she does know that the other side of that 50-50 balance, when we do take a month off in the summertime, or we do have a lot of time together, we believe that the quality time we have together as a family outweighs if I had a 9-to-5 job, coming home at 6:30, my daughter going to bed at 7. And so it's just it's a decision that we've had to make. And also, as you guys well know, just because I'm on the road for seven months a year doesn't mean that I'm off for 5 months. You're home preparing for those 5 months, or preparing for those 7 months, and you're doing pre-pro, and you're doing plots and drawings and conference calls. So it certainly is something that you need to focus on, and I didn't know that early on. I remember a time that my wife and I were sitting by the back gate at Disney. I had gone in for a shift, and she had just told me, she said, I don't want you going in. It's been too much. And I just looked at her, and I got out of the car and walked into work, because that's what I thought was most important. And so I've had to grow up a lot over the years. And
how are you doing that now on the road, as far as like how do you actually
one way, and
stay
this
connected?
is a very unique situation. Some of my clients are so cool. I do a lot of work in Orlando, and it's only a 7-hour drive for me down there. Normally I would fly, but just as a very specific example, one thing that we did is every time I get a show in Orlando and it works with our personal schedule, my wife and daughter will drive down with me. And my clients are cool with them staying in the hotel room, and we lived down there for a while, so they have friends and relationships down there. So that's 4, 5, 6 times a year that I get that month back with my family. Now we're working 18-hour days, but I'll see them in the morning and be able to kiss my daughter goodnight at night after she's asleep. But that's one way that one thing that we've done to make it work, is to spend more time together. And of course, technology is so awesome with FaceTime and staying in touch. I try to FaceTime my daughter every day, and it's not easy, that's for sure. And
squeezing in a FaceTime in between a bio break or something, it feels like an unnecessary pressure,
Yeah, it warms my heart when I walk out into the ballroom and I see Clem coming from backstage FaceTiming his son. And it's just so cool, because that's why we're all there. We're all there to take care of our families, and to see them making these connections on the road is pretty cool. And that's what it's all about to me.
I mean, it's hard to make that time, though, trying to squeeze it in, and then trying to get them to understand that, hey, I only have 5 minutes, but I just wanted to see you real quick,
Yeah, we had 2 fairly large personal tragedies that happened in our lives between shows, and I was home for a period of 24 hours, and I come home, we deal with it, we spend the time together, and then I have to go. There's now obviously there would be a point that, you know, if there was a death in the family or something happened, that we would back away, but we all have to make that decision too. Okay, is this the time where I call my client and say I'm not coming, or do I look at my wife and say I have to go? And to have that support at home that says I understand, you need to go, I think that's the biggest thing. It comes down to the relationship you have with your spouse, and if they totally get it or understand it or not. So it's certainly difficult. It's certainly difficult.
But it's beautiful to know that that support system is there, and that, like you said, that's your spouse, and they're understanding. And to an extent, you know, you're never all by yourself.
You're not.
All by myself. Have you ever met Celine Dion, Richard Dunn?
I mean, God, you know, you do a Google search of Richard Dunn, you don't see Dunn lights. You know, you don't see these beautiful pictures of the sets you've done. I see a picture of you with Celine Dion.
All right.
Come on, man.
All right,
What's
jokers.
up?
Okay, I didn't know how long it would be or if it would come up, but here it is. Yes, I have met Celine Dion, and it was wonderful. Speaking of life on the road and how awesome this is, we spend a lot of times in our glamorous, glitz and glamoury life in airports. And there was one time that I was at the Las Vegas airport, and with different circumstances, I ended up there overnight. While I was there overnight, I thought, you know what, I don't often get the chance to be in an empty airport. I'm going to shoot a little video and send it back to my wife and show some of my road friends and see if they're going to dig this or not. So I was listening to music, and I found the one, the only Celine Dion singing All By Myself, and I literally laughed out loud. I'm like, this is funny stuff. So I took my iPhone, a roll of luggage tape, and a wheelchair I found in my computer bag, and I just ran around the airport like a friggin' idiot, and shot my own little music video to Celine Dion's All By Myself. And I got home and put it online just to show my wife and show my friends, and I thought, well, I'm gonna get a call from Sony or somebody that says you can't use the song, take it down. Well, to my surprise, the next day I had like 150,000 hits, like literally overnight. I'm like, this is crazy. So I didn't think a whole lot of it, and then by the time I went to bed that night, it had cracked 1 million hits, and I got a phone call from Good Morning America saying, we would like you to be on the show tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
What for? Like,
I'm sorry, it wasn't me.
Yeah, what happened? So anyway, to make a very, very long story short, 22 million hits later, Celine Dion saw the video, and she said, I would really like to meet you. So we flew to Vegas, the whole family, and Caesar sent the limo for us, and they put us up in a suite and got to meet her, and it made all the media rounds, and Good Morning America, ABC, NBC, CBS. I was on Good Morning Australia, Canada AM. It was nutty. So if anybody wants to know what Clem and Bolsey are talking about, if you just Google Richard Dunn All By Myself, you'll get about 1,000 links.
I remember when that was happening, and I remember watching it on Facebook, just thinking, is this the same thing? Like, is this thing still like trending up and up and up and up? I remember thinking, oh my goodness, because I remember watching it the first time, and I was like, this is getting massively viral just in our production industry. Right. Or whatever. I was like, everyone knows about this, so fun. And then I'm thinking, wait, is that Good Morning America's version of it or whatever, like some sort of news bit on Richard Dunn? Yeah. That was so fun, man.
Yeah. Well, it was crazy, and then it went from there, and then different schools started picking up on it. And I had a chance to talk at Chapman University, UCLA, Writers Guild of America, University of Charleston, to film students and different folks, and it was a real interesting tie-in, because I did it just for creativity's sake. I didn't know anything was going to happen. I didn't expect anything to happen, and if I did, it was going to be negative. But that night, and I just wanted to create something. I wanted to create something from nothing. And when I get talking to the film students, the bottom line is this: and Clem and I have talked about this at great detail. You either have a goal and you have a passion and you want to work on stuff, or you don't. So many people, these film students, have the excuse, I don't have the budget, I don't have a cast, I don't have a crew, I don't have equipment. And that's just crap. You either want to make videos or you don't. Everybody has in their pocket right now the technology I used to shoot that video that was seen by 22 million people. And so no more excuses. Whether it's you want to work at Disney, whether you want to be a projectionist, whether you want to create the software, if you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to do it. So don't give anybody else any excuses. I would rather see, a horrible video produced online than somebody sitting there watching TV saying, I don't want to do that. I celebrate creativity. I celebrate people that say, I'm gonna go up and do this. So, without getting too into it, looking back on it, I realized that it was the same, the same kind of drive in me that I apply to other things. That night I could have read a book, gone to sleep, gone back to the strip, but I didn't. I chose to do something that was hard, and shoot that video, and it sure paid off for me, and it was well worth every second to be there and to be doing that. So yeah, pretty cool tie-in, Clem. Nice work.
Yeah, buddy. But even with all of it, because you did some tying back, some callbacks on some of your life experiences as well. You worked for free in order to get that paid gig on that second show. Yeah. You drove down to Orlando and you worked that whole summer selling light up toys in order to get that gig the next summer. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices in order to get where we want to go, and it's evident that you were able to do that. That's great.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the younger folks, I love talking to them and just setting their expectations straight. Be thrilled that you're in the industry. Get experience. Work for free. Go to your local theater. Don't let the paycheck be the first thing out of your mouth. Even when I did get the tech job at Disney, the first thing I did at 6:30 in the morning every morning at the Castle stage at the Magic Kingdom was sweep. I spent a half hour sweeping the stage and did very untechnical things, but I loved it. I was there, I was getting the experience, and just get the show hours under your belt. Again, go volunteer at your church, go to your local theater, and it'll get to a point where you're going to wake up one day and say, I know what I'm doing. I can do this, and then you have something to offer. But I just find a lot of people put the cart way before the horse nowadays and want to end up, and I'm not trumping that you got to pay your dues and blah blah blah, but there's a lot of truth to that just enjoy the moment and enjoy being there. And I remember putting my name tag on for the first day thinking, this is a victory for me. Then I went and I swept the stage. And so anyway, it's worth the effort, man. I wouldn't trade a day of it, that's for sure.
On that note, man, let's seize the day and get back.
Seize the day, man.
Well, Richard Dunn, thank you so much for everything, man. This has been awesome. If anybody wants to see or hear, actually, there's a really cool behind-the-scenes video, too, so we'll make sure we put both of those videos in the show notes for this episode. But Richard, thanks again, man. This was absolutely awesome. I appreciate it.
Love you guys. It's awesome. Appreciate everything we've been through, and thanks for the invite today.
Anytime, buddy.
For Clem and I, this is the production channel. Again, stay tuned. We'll be bringing you the very best from everything in the industry, everything from audio, video, lights, media server, worship, producing. That's what we want to do. We want to bring you this kind of stuff. We want you to listen to it when you're backstage or in between your bio breaks or when you're getting ready to go on a full day travel. Check back into productionchannel.com and you'll find the latest and greatest. With that, thank you, gentlemen, and see you guys next time.
Chatter.